Hey, health junkies! It's time for The Health Fix. Join your host, Dr. Janine Krause, as she gives you a dose of what you need to know and do right now to take control of your health from the inside out, to rebel against aging, look damn good, fight stress, and laugh every day.
Hello, health junkies. Welcome to another episode of The Health Fix. I'm your host, Dr. Janine Krause. Today, we are going to talk all about magnesium, another mineral deficiency that I commonly see in my patients. This episode is the second in a series of 5 episodes where I'm going to talk about nutrient, vitamin, and mineral deficiencies that I commonly see in my patients. My previous podcast episode to this was all about glycine, and it's an amino acid. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely do so, because the deficiency of magnesium and glycine go hand in hand. And the way that happens is it works with muscle recovery. So if you are someone that is working out regularly, that's huge. If you're someone that doesn't work out regularly, it's also a big thing. So don't tune me out on this, because we all have to recover from the day. Whether we push it to the limits or we are a desk jockey, our body still is working hard, and we need both the glycine and magnesium to help to keep our muscles healthy and prevent us from having aches and pains and things of that nature. So let's talk a little bit about this magnesium deficiency component here. I am shocked by how many young folks come into my practice that are extremely fatigued, and they're in their 20s and they're telling me, I feel like I'm 85. That's weird. That's not normal. We've got a lot of folks who are anxious. I've got a lot of folks in my practice that have heart palpitations. We've got muscle cramps, spasms, migraines, irritability, premenstrual syndrome, so PMS stuff. And there's no explanation. They've went through all of these different tests. We've looked at hormones, things of that nature. And ultimately, it often comes down to, I would say 9 times out of 10, to a darn magnesium deficiency. Now, magnesium deficiencies aren't commonly looked at with regular labs. You have to go to a specialty lab to get magnesium testing. And it's called magnesium red blood cell testing. So that's something I'll talk about here a little bit later. Or you can do a test by a company called Genova called the Nutra Eval. And this is something that I will do with my patients regularly. It's something that most insurances will cover up to a point. You have to pay a copay of about $149 or something of that nature. But it's well worth it. So if you're interested, look in my resources section of this podcast, and you can click on the component for the Nutra Eval testing from Genova. Now, if you're not up for something like that, but you want to know if you have a magnesium deficiency, you can request your doc to check your red blood cell magnesium levels. And I don't know what insurance would cover on that, if they would, but there are some specialty labs out there that will run that for you for a discount. So just ask your providers if that's a possibility, if you're wondering. And I'll put that in my resources at the end of this podcast. So let's jump into this magnesium thing. Why is it so important? Well, magnesium is used by every organ in our body. There are over 3,700 binding sites for receptors for magnesium alone. There's over 300 protein enzymes for detoxification used by magnesium. So let's think about that for a minute. If we have over 300 protein enzymes used for detox that are going to utilize magnesium, magnesium helps us to detoxify from environmental toxins. It helps us get rid of heavy metals, so lead, cadmium, antimony, these kind of things. I see these on my patients' labs all the time. And most of the time when those particular heavy metals are elevated, magnesium is also deficient. So something to keep in mind. We also have to detox from our frankenfoods. Our food system is broken. I say that over and over again, but there are so many things in our food that we don't even know. And magnesium helps us to kind of clear those out. So when I look at studies on magnesium, it's reported that about 75% of adults don't get enough magnesium. That's pretty crazy. And one of the main things that's happening here is that we're blocking absorption. If you drink coffee or if you have any other sources of caffeine, you are going to block magnesium absorption. How many of you are sitting there drinking your coffee and then you eat your breakfast, then you grab some water and you pop your vitamins? Yep, probably a lot of you. And guess what? You're going to block a lot of your mineral absorption there. Now add to that certain medications. If you are on insulin, if you are taking a diuretic for a blood pressure condition or anything else of that nature, something called hydrochlorothiazide, that's the most common one out there, you're blocking your magnesium absorption. So there's other medications out there as well, antacids, things of that nature. It's quite crazy how many things block magnesium absorption. Steroids do as well. So if you are on a corticosteroid, same thing for antibiotics. They are totally blocking your magnesium absorption. And then here's the biggest one that I think that is a big issue is glyphosate. What that is it's an herbicide. And so if you are out there and you're like, I'm getting my greens, they're rich in magnesium, but you're not getting them organically, you're pretty much getting greens for fiber, but you're not getting the minerals out of them because glyphosate is going to block absorption of magnesium. So another big reason for why organic vegetables are extremely important. Another biggie here is that a lot of folks are convinced that they need a ton of calcium. And we've been pounded, like that's been pounded in our heads for a long time. Like, oh, calcium, calcium, calcium. The Dairy Council tells you have to have 3 servings of dairy a day because you need your calcium, calcium, calcium for strong bones. And they totally forget about your muscles. If you have too much calcium in your bloodstream, you are going to have muscle spasms because the ratio of calcium to magnesium in your blood is going to be completely off. And calcium, its main job is to create muscle contraction. Our body stores calcium around the muscles, and when we contract our muscles, we use up calcium. But at the same time, we need magnesium because magnesium helps with producing energy for us. So I'm going to get back to those details here in a little bit, but essentially, if you have too much calcium in the body, it's going to throw off your magnesium balance. So something to keep in mind. So what the heck exactly does magnesium do for us? It is in charge of quite a few different things. It activates our nervous system. It also, as I just mentioned, helps us to create energy. So it's involved in helping to go through every single step that our cells go through in each and every one of those cells in something called the mitochondria. It helps us to create energy, ATP, adenosine triphosphate, if you are a science geek out there. So this ATP or energy is critical because if we're blocking magnesium, we can't get certain steps to happen in this cycle to create energy. That's a problem. That could be why there's a lot of fatigued individuals out there. Another biggie that could be why we don't have enough energy is magnesium helps us to digest fat, proteins, and carbohydrates. It's huge in that department. And there's so many folks out there with trash metabolisms. They can't figure out why they're not losing weight, things of that nature. And magnesium is a huge player in the breakdown of food. So we have a society of folks who are overfed and undernourished. And the reason being is because a lot of us are missing minerals. We're blocking our absorption of these minerals, and we need these minerals to help us to create energy and help us to digest these foods that we're eating. And so if we have someone who is noticing that they keep gaining weight and they're eating clean, most of the time it really has to do with going back to what are you not absorbing in your minerals and what's happening on the level of breaking down your fats and proteins and carbs. So something to keep in mind there if you're suffering with any of those issues. Another big thing, and I've already mentioned it, is that magnesium helps us to repair our muscle tissue. It helps us to repair our cells in particular. It helps us with DNA and RNA creation. So these are our building blocks of the cellular material, our messages, our blueprints that we need to help us to create new cells and signal different things to happen in the body. We also use magnesium to create serotonin. And so obviously we're all, well aware that serotonin is our happy hormone, our neurochemical. But one of the things that a lot of us lack is we'll take a whole bunch of different serotonin boosting supplements such as 5-HTP, or we'll take we'll go even back and try to take other herbs that boost serotonin. But if you're still deficient in magnesium, you're not going to convert things such as tryptophan to 5-HTP and 5-HTP to the serotonin. You're not going to do that if you don't have magnesium to help you do it. And so a lot of people will say, well, I tried tryptophan or I tried 5-HTP and it didn't work. Well, yeah, if you don't have the other components to help the conversion of those molecules, yeah, it's not going to work. So let's get into what I see in practice, because I think this is the most critical thing here, because it's pretty much why obviously I do this podcast, but it's also why I wanted to do a series on the vitamins and nutrients and minerals that I find absolutely critical for patients, because they're the ones I see over and over and over again as being deficient. As a naturopath, it's probably one of the most common questions I get when I'm out at a party or even on a panel is like, what vitamins do you take and why, and what do you think everyone should be on? And I don't ultimately think that everyone should be on the same thing, but when you see over and over and over again in labs the same deficiencies, it pretty much tells you that you've got a huge population of folks that definitely need certain things. And it also just tells you a little bit about age, because I have categorized certain deficiencies that I see over and over time in terms of someone's age. So today I'm going to talk about in general, because pretty much everyone has a deficiency in magnesium when I see it over and over again. So in my practice, I'm seeing a lot of folks with arrhythmias, so heart arrhythmias. So their heart doesn't beat normally. I also see a lot of folks with palpitations. In particular, a certain subset of folks is firefighters and young ladies. And when I say young ladies, I'm talking about mid to late 20s, some folks into their 30s with these arrhythmias that are unexplainable. Like, why do you have this weird heart arrhythmia? And something called preventricular contractions, PVCs. These are associated with anxiety, but I can't help but think that magnesium has a player in there, because a lot of my folks that have these issues, we give them some magnesium. And I don't just give magnesium when I know someone has an arrhythmia. I'm looking at labs. And I will, honestly, it's like 9 times out of 10, if someone has an arrhythmia, a palpitation, they have a deficiency in magnesium. And it's almost like clockwork that's what's going to come back on the labs. So one of the biggies is the arrhythmias and palpitations. Now, going back to why young ladies and why firefighters in terms of the subset, well, I think if you look at it in terms of firefighters, the young ladies, I think we can also put into this category too, but a lot of us are working in our late 20s, early 30s to establish our careers. We have a lot going on in life. We're stressed. Firefighters live in a fight or flight environment all the time. They don't know when they're going to get a call and have to go running out. And I see this just so commonly back and forth. So I think at this point, my thought is that if you are stressed, you're probably depleting a lot more magnesium than the average individual here. And so something to just keep in mind. Now, another thing that I've connected with magnesium deficiency is metabolic syndrome. And what this is pretty much the quote of, or I'm putting quotes, air quotes of pre-diabetic. I hate the term pre-diabetic because it's basically like your metabolism screwed up. It's pre-diabetic, yeah, if you don't fix it, you're going to be diabetic. So it's pretty much like you're already there, but you can reverse it. So with metabolic syndrome, these folks have issues with balancing their blood sugar because their body isn't able to take in glucose and utilize it for energy. So these folks are fatigued, they're gaining weight, they're feeling like they're hungry all the time, and unfortunately, they're not taking in any of the nutrition from the foods that they eat, and their body keeps thinking it's starving and it holds on to more and more weight. So this is a common issue. And most of these folks who have higher hemoglobin A1Cs, so this is a lab test for blood sugar balance over time, most commonly will also have a magnesium deficiency. Another big thing that I see in connection with magnesium deficiencies is insomnia, which is wild, but you can use magnesium at night, and I actually do recommend magnesium in general at night, but it definitely can help with getting folks to sleep because magnesium helps to calm the nervous system. Raynaud's So anyone heard of Raynaud's out there? Raynaud's is a autoimmune condition where the blood vessels, the little tiny blood vessels going into the hands, are malfunctioning. And by that means they do not allow for blood flow to properly get into the hands. And these folks end up with white, purple, blue hands that are extremely cold, and they're extremely sensitive to changes in the environment in terms of temperature. And Raynaud's is linked to an autoimmune type of condition. But when I see almost, I would say every 5 women with that come into my office, every 5th person has Raynaud's, that's messed up. That can't be possible that we all have that much autoimmune disease. Can we? That's crazy. But I do test, and commonly Raynaud's goes along with a magnesium deficiency. We give some folks some magnesium and things start to get better. Crazy. I also think for Raynaud's, acupuncture, just side note, acupuncture, magnesium, good combo. Now, migraines, and especially premenstrual migraines, these are oftentimes a magnesium deficiency. And in my practice, I will test folks, and oftentimes mid-cycle, I will make sure folks start taking magnesium no matter what. If they're not into taking supplements throughout the whole, day in, day out, at least from mid-cycle on. I've actually experimented with magnesium injections in my office at ovulation, so mid-cycle, for ladies to help with migraines, and it can be extremely beneficial. And the reason this happens is because during the second half of our menstrual cycle, magnesium does drop, and that can result in spasms in the brain arteries, and that's kind of where we start with migraines. Also, we use a lot of magnesium to help with bloating, low blood sugar, because it helps with stabilizing your blood sugar, like I mentioned before, in terms of metabolic syndromes. Also fluid retention, so swelling and sugar cravings. So magnesium is huge. And funny enough, 1 ounce of dark chocolate actually has quite a bit of magnesium in it. And so it might be why ladies are like, oh my gosh, clamoring for this magnesium. I need my chocolate fix. And it could be a built-in process that we have in our bodies to seek out magnesium at all costs. So guys, if you're listening to this, go grab some magnesium. All right, so you might be thinking at this point, okay, I might have a magnesium deficiency. So how much do I need and what should I do? So the recommended daily allowance set by the government for magnesium is 320 milligrams for ladies and 420 milligrams for guys. And that's quite a bit. That's a decent amount of veggies that you need to eat to get that in. And so usually I have folks basically supplementing with it because I feel like we have to overdo it a little bit to ensure that we get better absorption. Another big component with magnesium is that most of us have trash digestive systems. We might not feel digestive symptoms. Maybe we have some occasional gas or bloating, but unfortunately, we're a society of folks walking around with leaky gut. Our digestive system lining is damaged. We have molecules getting across into the bloodstream, and that shouldn't be there. And then we get this inflammatory reaction on our gut. Another big issue is that a lot of us are drinking too much alcohol. And alcohol is an irritant to the gut, but it also causes issues with magnesium in terms of blocking its absorption. So keep that in mind too. So when we're looking at magnesium and trying to get it into the diet, one of the biggies is looking at what foods can help you. So spinach, chard, so your dark leafy greens, pumpkin seeds, yogurt or kefir, some almonds, black beans, avocado, figs, dark chocolate, as I already mentioned. And when I say dark chocolate, I'm talking 70% cacao or higher. Hershey's bars, don't cut it. You want a good quality chocolate in this case. And I'm talking about Valrhona, I'm talking about things such as the Endangered Species brand, some higher end chocolates. That is the good stuff. And bananas also have some magnesium in them too. So those are kind of like your basic foods. The only problem is you want to make sure that you're working on your digestive system before you try to go that route. You also don't want to be drinking sodas or anything with caffeine in it or eating junk. So basically you want to be eating clean, you want to heal up your gut, and then eat your good magnesium rich foods. But I do think that you've got to supplement a little bit in this department because it just works better. And that's what I've seen in my practice, is it just works better versus trying to get folks to eat all the magnesium rich foods, because those foods I just ticked off there, they have somewhere between like 150 and 50 to 150 milligrams of magnesium. And remember that the recommended daily allowance is around 320 for ladies and 420 for guys. So it's you got to eat at least 3 cups of spinach a day to get in that target. But then you also have to think like, am I going to absorb that? Is my gut okay? Things of that nature. So in other podcasts, I do talk about how to fix your leaky gut. Tune into those and get started on that if you think that your digestive system is pretty trash. And ultimately, I'm going to say that I think everyone's is, but there you have it. So moving on to this supplementation of magnesium, what do we do? How do we do it? What are the best ways? Well, I typically look at magnesium and the different types of it as to what are we trying to treat here. Magnesium citrate is probably the most common type of magnesium out there. The only issue is that citrate, I use the C on that to remind my patients that C means crap. And it's not that it's crap in terms of its product, it's that it's going to make you go to the bathroom, because magnesium citrate is a laxative. And so if you do have constipation, magnesium citrate might be a good one for you. It's also highly linked for those who have anxiety. And it helps immensely when taken in the evening with insomnia too. The only problem with magnesium citrate is you want to ramp up slowly on it, because if you go for the gusto and you take, say, 500 milligrams right off the bat, you might end up with some serious diarrhea. And you might not like that. So what my thought here on magnesium citrate is usually to start around 300 milligrams or so and go from there. If you already have loose stools and your digestive system's a little wonky, you might even want to start at 150. But watch the magnesium citrate if you have gut issues. And typically I will say that you should go to another form. So let's talk about magnesium glycinate. Magnesium glycinate is probably my favorite of the magnesiums because it's the best absorbed, and it's great for just correcting general deficiencies of magnesium. And I commonly will start patients off on the magnesium glycinate, see how things go, and then I'll often switch to magnesium malate for anyone that's got muscle issues, chronic pain, fibromyalgia, if you're having muscle spasms, if you're having difficulty recovering from workouts, things of that nature. I really like folks to consider the magnesium malate in that case. Magnesium glycinate is good. It's good to correct deficiencies, and then oftentimes, like I said, I'll switch to the magnesium malate after a bottle or so of glycinate. Now, typically with glycinate, the dosage there is anywhere from 400 to 800 milligrams a day. Typically at night, I will do it about 2 hours before bed because it has a great relaxing effect. Now, magnesium threonate, this is the one that's been researched the most for nerves. It helps with dementia. It helps with mood. I use this commonly if we're working with PMS, a PMS that doesn't have a migraine component. If it's PMS with a migraine component, oftentimes I'll start with glycinate or malate. Now, the other biggie with threonate is mitochondrial uptake. So what the heck does that mean? Your cells do really, if you have fatigue cells, by that I mean if you have a metabolism that's really slow and you're having trouble losing weight, oftentimes magnesium threonate is the best one to go for there. But typically I'll start with glycinate, then go to the threonate and see how it goes. Now, out in the market, we also have magnesium oxide and magnesium carbonate. I typically don't recommend those two because, for one, magnesium carbonate's only about 45% magnesium, and you're not getting full magnesium in there. You're getting some antacid properties because of the carbonate, so you could think of it that way. If you have acid reflux, it might be helpful. but it's not the one that I'm looking for when I'm looking at muscle and aches and pains and things of that nature in particular. Magnesium Oxide, that is a stool softener. It works similar to magnesium citrate that I mentioned before. It's only 60% magnesium in its composition. And I see magnesium oxide pretty commonly in detox formulas, which I think is fine because definitely you want to be pooping out that stuff if you've got a detox formula. So I wouldn't do it for long term, and I wouldn't do it for helping with muscle issues, migraines, Raynaud's, those types of things. I would be thinking more of glycine, so magnesium glycinate first, then magnesium malate. So what are some of my favorite products? I like a product by the company Designs for Health. It's buffered magnesium. It is a good one to start with there. I also like Osiplex MK7. Sounds really serious. That one is by a company called Zymogen. I typically will use that one combined with OptiMag. And so what the heck is all this? Osiplex is for the bones, OptiMag is for the muscles, and it's a combination of calcium and magnesium to get you a good balance of the two. And that I will typically use for ladies. I'll typically use it for anyone who's working out quite a bit. CrossFitters, that's a common group that I'll use it in. I will also use it in my folks who are over 50. So anyone that's losing some bone density as age goes on, this combination of the Osiplex, so OSA, Plex, PLEX, MK, the letters M and K, and 7, plus OptiMag. Now, if you are having more issues in the nervous system department, so perhaps you've got some numbness, tingling, perhaps you've got some mood changes, PMS, perhaps you're struggling with brain fog, perhaps you have some issues with your metabolism, oftentimes I'll use something called OptiMag Neuro. And this is a combination of magnesium magnesium threonate, magnesium glycinate, and it's a good combo. And in particular, OptiMag Neuro is also great for folks who have fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue too. I will commonly use those together. And that is another product by Zymogen. So obviously I don't expect folks to be taking notes the whole time I'm chatting. So this is going to be in the resources section of this podcast. So if you were wondering what all these weird names and letters and things I'm spewing out at you are, just check the notes at the bottom of the podcast and you can go from there. So we've got those. Now, in terms of other ways to get in magnesium, so say maybe you're like, my gut is so trashed, I don't know if I'm going to get in the magnesium. Or if you're like, I want a quick uptake of magnesium, I'm hurting right now, I don't feel good right now, you can go to the old school Transdermal Magnesium. And there is a guy, he's still alive. His name's Dr. Mark Circus. He kind of is the father of all of the magnesium transdermal research. And by that I mean he works a lot with gels and creams that have magnesium in them, which can be quite amazing if you have a focused area that aches on you. The only caveat about magnesium gels and creams is that they tingle and kind of burn a little bit. So you put them on, you're like, okay, this is good. And then all of a sudden it's like this, why am I tingling? Why am I really warm? Ow, why does it burn? It's just how the magnesium gels work. So something to consider, but typically I will use a magnesium gel on a small area. So if you have an injury and you're trying to calm that area and heal it up, I would say use a magnesium gel or cream. If you're just in general aching, my favorite go-to is an Epsom salt bath or going to a float tank. So going to a float center if you have those in your community. Here where I live in Washington, we have two great ones in town, and I like to float. So what is a float tank? These are controlled tanks that have magnesium chloride or magnesium sulfate in them. In particular, one of the folks I go to, or one of the places I go to here in Tacoma, the Northwest Float Center, they have magnesium sulfate. And they use it they've got it dialed in terms of how much they put into the water. I do not have that memorized at this point. But you get in there, and if you've just shaved your legs or you have a cut, it's going to tingle. It's not going to feel so great, but it'll subside. And ultimately, these sensory deprivation tanks, I mean, you get in there, you let your ears get soaked into the water. I mean, you literally zone out and chill. And when you get out of there, you feel like $1,000,000. It's amazing. So if you haven't tried a float tank yet, I really highly recommend it. And if you're claustrophobic, it's not that bad. You can leave the door open and it's all good. So if you suffer with chronic aches and pains, fibromyalgia, things of that nature, you've got to try out a float tank. It's huge, and it also helps immensely after things such as marathons or triathlons or any of those events that you might be doing and feeling just completely trashed. Moving, I actually highly recommend that to my folks if they're moving and they have to lift everything and all that junk involved with moving. Floating afterwards is awesome. So that's a method of transdermal magnesium supplementation, and Epsom salt baths are great in that aspect too. The thing that I would definitely say about Epsom salt baths is the stuff that you get, the cheap Epsom salts that you get at the grocery store, are not as high quality as certain companies. In particular, there's a company called Ancient Mineral Salt that is going to be magnesium chloride. It is a good company. The other company that I like is something called Saltworks, and they have magnesium sulfate. You can get up to like 50-pound bags of the stuff. But I think it's quite worth it to use those versus the cheapy stuff at the grocery store, because there is a difference. I've seen a difference. My patients have seen a difference in using one versus the other. Now, here's the thing about the transdermal magnesium. It's great for an immediate use. Like if you are feeling extremely achy, that's one thing to use it. If you are just worried about taking too many supplements, and hey, I absolutely don't want people to be taking a ton of stuff and a whole suitcase of supplements. I would rather if folks could do a bath every day. My goodness, that would be an amazing way to end a day and just really calm the muscles. The thing about it is obviously, like I just said, it's being able to do the bath every day. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll have folks do a bath and not do the oral supplementation that day. And then on the days that they're not doing the baths, do a oral supplementation of magnesium. So that's kind of the breakdown in terms of magnesium and how I help folks with getting it in. And we dial it in. A lot of times a base dose for some people isn't enough, and sometimes folks need less of it. There are some resources out there to help you to get more information on how to dose your magnesium and what you might need. In particular, there is a gal out there. She's a medical doctor and a naturopath, Dr. Carolyn Dean. She wrote a book called The Magnesium Miracle. It's quite possibly one of the best books in terms of helping you to understand how deficient the universe is in magnesium and how it can help us to really live the healthiest life we possibly could, because magnesium is a huge critical component of all of, as you know, every organ, like I said earlier in the podcast, uses magnesium. It's huge. It's important. And Dr. Mark Serkis, he also has a book about transdermal magnesium therapy. I find that book interesting in terms of those of you who might be thinking about for aches and pains and acute injuries. You can use the transdermal magnesium and spot treat. So say your shoulder hurts, say your leg hurts, say your knee hurts. You could spot treat with the transdermal magnesium gels and creams. And he talks all about that. Also, big one, plantar fasciitis. If your heels hurt, your bottom of your feet hurt, transdermal magnesium and even foot soaks with the Epsom salts can be quite amazing in that case. So something to think about there, a little food for thought. I take magnesium myself. I do it every evening, 2 hours before I go to bed, because I like the effect to help me to calm down from the day. Also helps to get my mind relaxed. And that's typically the way I will do it unless I go for a float. I do a float tank about once a month at this point. I used to do it twice a month when things were a little bit more crazy for me in terms of stress, because it is also a great stress reliever. So that's kind of how I do it. I really highly recommend you looking to see how deficient you might be in magnesium before you overload yourself on magnesium, having listened to this podcast. The best ways to test, like I mentioned before, are looking at your red blood cell magnesium. And you can get this through conventional labs or specialty labs. The best way to go about it is to ask your medical doctor if they would add that to your lab sheet. And you want red blood cell, not serum magnesium. You won't get a good reading on serum magnesium because it's just a general component of what's in the blood. You want what's in your red blood cell. What is your cell actually using? What does it have stored in it? That's what you want to know. And if you're looking at or considering more advanced testing, the Nutra-Eval, it's NUTR-EVAL by Genova Diagnostics. That is the best test that I found for looking at vitamin, mineral, amino acid, and nutrient deficiencies. And it also tells you a lot about how you break down fats, proteins, and carbs. And I highly recommend checking that lab out. Their website is gdx.net. So with all of that information that you have now, I want you to kind of let it sink in a little bit, see if you have any symptoms that might be related to not getting enough magnesium. And if you think you do, check it out, go see a doc, get them to test you, and go from there. And if you're looking for folks that do the Nutra-Eval testing, typically it is functional medicine docs or naturopaths in that case. And if you're on the website at gdx.net, you'll be able to see who might be doing the testing in your area. Okay, you've survived another of the Health Fix podcasts. I'm your host, Dr. Janine Krause. Stay tuned for my next podcast. I'm going to talk all about how quite a few of us are overfed and undernourished, and we are muscle wasting, and what nutrients we need to get in to help to combat that. Alrighty, stay tuned for another episode. I'm your host, Dr. Janine Krause. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to the Health Fix, the podcast all about taking control of your health, rebelling against aging, and having fun every day. A lot of patients ask me, do you think I'm aging too fast? So, I created an evaluation checklist for you to see for yourself. Plus, I created a resource guide to help you slow down the aging process right now. You can find it for free on my website, drjkrausend.com. If you like this podcast, help get the word out to others by liking it and rating it. If you'd like more natural health tips and want to join our Facebook community where I interact daily, click on the Join Group button on our website at drjkrausend.com.